And once we told him who we were, immediately he was like, "Oh man, I've checked out your guys' work." I mean, he didn't even, and that's something that you and I have discussed is for a person to take time out of their day in person to give you a compliment or to recognize your work means so much more than somebody, let's just say, leaving a like or a comment on social media. Welcome back to the Electives podcast. As always, we appreciate you guys tuning in. This will be episode 8, I believe. Yeah, and this episode is going to be a little heavier, simply because we ended up finding out some news here within the last 24 hours that kind of changed the way that we were going to shoot today. But you can fill them in on what we'll be talking about today, Cuzzo.
All right, yeah. So, like Malcolm said, the episode's a little heavier. We received news yesterday that Aurora lost one of its young angels, we'll call him.
No, up and coming.
18-year-old young man, and the episode actually hasn't dropped, and we talk about our J moment.
Yeah, which we just had.
We just had the J moment.
It
was Saturday,
yeah.
And you guys will hear it on the next episode. But in summary, we were covering our full circle moment, answering the question from Arayla Swan. If you haven't heard that episode, check that out. And how we had it at such a quick, only 7 episodes in, we were talking about that.
Yep.
So for those who don't know Jay, and for us personally, we don't know him, but
No.
he's over at the Pre-Mill family. They have a storefront down in Aurora, and like we said, he's gone too soon. So we're kind of gonna be covering our J moment, appreciation of life, and kind of what this moment in time that we are experiencing right now,
For sure.
what it means, and for those people who've also experienced something like this, or for the people who are experiencing it in real time, our hearts go out to you, prayers go to your family, and so let's talk about that J moment. Let's talk about why we're calling it the J moment.
Right.
And we're not, and I want to make it clear either. We're not calling it a J moment because of what happened.
Right.
We actually shot an episode of excitement, of like inspiration because of him.
Yeah.
And less than 24 hours of that happening is when something happened to him.
Yeah.
So I guess fill him in what that J moment meant to you.
So even I guess before I talk about that specific moment and interaction that we just had with him on Saturday, I have seen him around Aurora, downtown Aurora.
Yeah.
He was, from my understanding, he was taken in, like you said, by the Pre-Mill family, and he was a young man that was, like a lot of young men, they grow up, maybe without a mentor, maybe without a father figure. And luckily, the guys over at Pre-Mill got big hearts. They're stand-up guys, and they took him under their wing, and they were mentoring him. And you could see a change in the young man because he would come to our barbershop that I work at, and he would always come in and say what's up to everybody. My coworker at the time who was cutting his hair, he would always post his work on his social media and say shout out to his barber for getting him fresh, things like that. I mean, he was a good kid. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure he was no different than the rest of us at his age. Yeah, he made some mistakes, but the young man was really at a point in his life where he was trying to make a change. So even that from just afar, knowing that little bit about him, I was rooting for him. And then that Saturday, because we were supposed to do a shoot, which is today, we were supposed to shoot today at that particular location. So we went Saturday just to kind of get the specs and get an idea of where and how we wanted to set the cameras up and lighting and all that. And Jay was there working. You know, he's the manager there. He was running it.
Yeah.
And, you know, the first thing he says is, "What's up, fellas?" You know, and he was very polite, very kind, very professional.
Yep.
And once we told him who we were, immediately he was like, "Oh, man, I've checked out your guys' work." I mean, he didn't even, and that's something that you and I have discussed, is for a person to take time out of their day in person to give you a compliment or to recognize your work means so much more than somebody, let's just say, leaving a like or a comment on social media. It's not that we don't appreciate that, but he took the time to let us know, like, hey, I actually listen to you guys, and the content that you guys are putting out is good content. And for us, we both kind of looked at each other like we weren't expecting that. You know, we weren't expecting that at all. And you could tell it was coming from a place of genuineness. It wasn't like he was just, you know, saying it just to say it. But I remember walking out of there and just thinking like, oh, that was pretty cool, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, like it's like you said, like he didn't owe us that.
No.
And for being 18, I believe he's 18. You know, to have the confidence and ability to communicate like that, it says a lot.
It does.
Because I mean, there's people our age that just they don't know how to muster out a compliment if they wanted to.
It's true. No, it's
so
true.
So that you know, you talking about how you felt afterwards. Man, I left that place and felt like we like, oh, not like we made it, but it was just like one of those feelings like, man, somebody's actually like listening and you know, appreciating what we're putting out.
Right.
And you know, he did say, like, you know, he's like, man, I really like what you guys are talking about.
Yeah.
You know, and he's like I even recommended to Gio that he should do the podcast with you guys because you guys got some good stuff.
Yeah.
And I mean, to be honest, man, for us doing this, you know, we entered this with no expectations, just doing it because we wanted to. He definitely touched me in that moment, and you know, I'll appreciate him forever for that, because I'm sure there's plenty of other times he's done that, and that just goes to show you like the impact that somebody can have on you when you don't even know them, because
and we're pretty much twice his age. Almost, you know.
Right.
And the thing about, like, kind of like what you're saying too about this podcast, the stuff that we're putting out, we're trying to inspire other people that are our age, but also inspire the youth.
Right.
And in that moment, it was the other way around.
The other way around.
He inspired us.
Yeah.
By taking time out of his day.
Right. Yeah, and we always talk about on the podcast for the that, you know, you get all your life experience, and then once you turn 30, you kind of, the game slows down. But what we haven't touched on and is how somebody at any age can impact your life in some way forever.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Because like we said, we call it a J moment. And in that time, like, a J moment will always be there forever. Even if I never talk to him again, at the time when it happened, it was like, man, that I remember when I do. Remember that guy Jay? Remember what he told us? And like, to think about where we could be in a year, it's you know, it's heartbreaking because you know, we'll never be able to tell him that.
I know.
I think that's what hurt the most yesterday after thinking about it was you know, like, he did that, but he'll never know. And that kills me.
I do feel like we would have spoken about that today if we would have shot the episode, because he might have been there, and two, we would have just brought it up in general, because we would have spoken on the perspective of our first interaction of going to that place. Because I've known Gio for a while, and I've known, you know, the guys at Primo for a while, but I had never been in there, and so that being my first experience, it was like I also wanted to tell Gio, hey man, you know, you hired the right guy.
Right.
You know, yes, he's a young man, he's still a kid, but you hired the right guy.
Yeah.
You know, he's on it. You know, he's like I said, he was professional, well spoken, well mannered. You know, that goes a long way.
Yeah, it does, man.
That goes a really long way. So
No, yeah, it definitely goes a long way. So we just, covering this J moment. It's just, if for people out there, be open to being inspired by other people, no matter what it is they're doing. You have to take a look at actually what they're doing, and figure out a way to learn from it, and then that's how you learn to appreciate it, and that's how you can get inspired from it. You know what I'm saying?
For sure.
With this happening, it's like, the questions come up, right? As they always do.
Yeah.
But you learn to appreciate life, more so now that something like that happens, right?
For sure.
And then the question that always comes up is why.
Yeah. No, and it I think depending on a person's belief,
right,
or what they believe in, if they do believe in a higher power or not, whatever whether it be Christian, Islam, Buddhism, whatever the case is,
right.
Depending on your relationship with your higher power, will determine how you look at situations like this, right? And it's rough because like we said, we didn't know him for that long, for an extended period of time, but he had such a big moment for us as a podcast, that we're always going to remember him.
Right.
And so in that sense, you felt like you lost something that was important.
Right.
And that did have an impact.
Right.
On your life. And you ask yourself, why do these things happen? Why does, natural disasters that end up taking, hundreds, if not thousands of lives happen?
Right.
And you try and make sense of that.
Right.
And for myself personally, man, what I always try to do is take as much positive as I can away from it.
Right.
What is this moment supposed to teach me, or what is this moment supposed to remind me of?
Right.
And what I always come back to is extreme gratitude.
Right.
Extreme gratitude and extreme appreciation for life.
Yep.
The relationships that I do have, my friends, my family, and just making sure that I stay present, and that I, as cliche as it sounds, but yes, living every day and enjoying it, and reminding myself, like, man, you just don't know how much time you have. And that's something that I'll say I wasn't always able to think like this.
Yeah.
And take the positive away from it.
Right.
At times I remember losing, when I think back to when I first lost somebody that was close to me. He was older. He was older. Like he was, he lived a long life. So it wasn't like he, this situation where he's a young man, and way too soon. But I still had a moment where I was like, man, could quote unquote a higher being let him live for a little bit longer? Did he have to go right then and there, or could he just one more year even? But I have to remind myself that I'm thinking about things from a human perspective. I can only ask the question, if you will, but ultimately I'm not in control.
Yeah. That's an answer I don't think we'll ever know.
No.
Down here. And like you said, it's like, for him, he was 18, and you say, man, well, could you have let him be here a little longer?
Yeah.
Obviously that's what everybody would have wanted, that personally knows him. Because you would want to see where he was going to be
his
at.
Growth,
what his growth was going to be, because whoever he was beforehand, before I met him, I really don't care.
It's irrelevant.
It's irrelevant to me. So, because obviously whoever says anything about mistakes, like you brought up, it don't matter, because he had a lot of probably J moments.
Oh, for sure.
With a bunch of people.
Yeah.
So, it's just a sad story, man.
And I wanted to say too, man, I'm proud of us for taking the time to discuss it.
Yeah.
Even though it's so fresh.
Right.
Even though it's, it just all of this happened within the last 72 hours,
Right.
right? But not being afraid to have this discussion,
Yep.
not being afraid to talk about it.
Right.
Obviously, it is something that's difficult to talk about, but I think it shows the maturity
Yep.
that we have, and what this one of the principles that this podcast is about is that we don't want to run from any topic.
Right.
We want to be as real and as authentic as we can be.
Right.
And discussing him and talking about him and the experience that he had is almost also therapeutic.
Yeah, it is.
It kind of helps us work through
everything.
the grieving process,
Right.
You know, and yeah, man, it's
That's a good thing to bring up, because stuff like this happens all the time. Sadly, people go through losses a lot,
yeah,
you know, and there's people who just don't get through it.
Yep.
And like you said, this is one way. You just have to talk your way through it.
Mm-hmm.
Talk through the moments. Talk
Mm-hmm.
through the good and the bad.
The good and the bad,
You
yeah.
know, and it is gonna hurt initially.
Right.
Probably hurt a lot,
Right.
but when it's all said and done, you'll feel a lot better.
Yeah.
You
because
know?
you can kind of I don't think you'll ever fully 100% find peace
Right.
in it, but you'll feel like a weight has been a little lifted off your shoulders. You
Right.
know?
Right. And like we were talking about how inspired he made us feel, and that's what I'll hold on to, you know, from not even knowing him, but I'll always hold on to that. And then when I think about it and he comes into my mind, I'm like, well, we don't know how much time is left.
We don't. Yeah.
So if, you know, I have to stay doing what I'm supposed to do, because you'll never know. Life is full of ups and downs.
Yeah.
And as we just experienced, we went from here,
Yeah,
like feeling on top of the world, and like we were gonna, you know, we were gonna shoot the episode today and relive it,
Mm-hmm.
and then it's
nosedive.
down.
Yeah.
And I think for not only us and people who are listening,
Mhm.
that's a tough thing to swallow, man.
It is.
You know?
Because the moment I found out, I called you.
Right.
Because I knew it was late at night, but I'm like, I couldn't wait till the morning to tell you, because it was on my mind.
Right.
You know, and I felt like you should know.
Yeah.
Because we literally the
talking.
previous day we're just talking about it.
Right.
You know, so, and I knew, I'm like, the moment I called you, I said, you know, this I don't know how we're gonna do tomorrow or today, you know, or
Right.
anything like that, but I have to talk about this, man, because I can't not stop thinking about it, you know.
Yeah. I was the same way, man. I was the same way, and we just came off of a second high, because we had our men's league, and we won. So
right.
like it's like we had that, we won the game. I mean, the last thing that's on my mind is anything sad or anything negative.
Yep.
And it's just, you know, life will throw that at you when you least expect it.
Yep.
And you know, just for the people out there, it's like talking through it is one thing.
Yeah.
If you can't talk through it, what would you say would be the next thing to do?
I would say, if you're not a person that is good at opening up and talking about things and talking about your feelings and talking about your emotions, maybe it would be good to see a therapist who can maybe help you open up a little bit. And it's easier said than done. You know, you have to I always advocate for finding the right therapist, for really taking your time and doing your due diligence. You may have to go through a couple therapists or a few therapists or a lot of therapists before you find the right one for you.
Right.
But ultimately, in order to be able to open up, someone's going to have to ask you the right questions.
Right.
You know, and sometimes the right questions are tough.
Right.
But if you give yourself the opportunity to create a space where you can be open, where you can be vulnerable, well, then you can heal and you can grow. But it's tough, man. And, you know, something you mentioned too is like, anytime something like this happens, whether it's a young person, a person that's our age, or somebody who's a little older, but especially when it's somebody around our age or younger, you do think about your own mortality. You think about how much time you have left.
Right.
and you become a little more conscious of that. You know, you hug your daughters a little tighter.
Right.
You know, you say I love you to your wife, your significant other, a little more, or
Right.
you know. And like yesterday, I was having this conversation with my girlfriend, and you know, I even said this to her yesterday. I said, thank you for giving me a space where I can just talk through this.
Right.
Because right after I got off the phone with you, I was in a funk, man.
Yeah, I was the
sitting
same
on
way,
the-
man.
I was sitting on the couch just in a funk,
Yep.
and she could tell, you know. And
Yeah.
she didn't know what to say, but I didn't. And I think that's something too that I would like our viewers and our listeners to understand is when something like this occurs, or just when someone's going through something that's very difficult in life, sometimes you don't have to say anything. You know, I think that's our natural reaction.
Yep.
Is we want to comfort someone by saying positive things, by
Right.
saying the right things. But sometimes there's nothing to say.
No.
Just being present is enough.
Right.
Just allowing a person to know that you're there with them
Right.
and that you're feeling with them.
Right.
Because to me, sometimes, man, language is the most simplest form of communicating. You know,
Right.
when you're there with a loved one and you're watching them go through something that's very difficult, no words have to be explained.
No.
You can feel that person's pain.
Right.
You know, and that I think is another thing that does connect us as human beings. Our
Yeah.
ability to feel that, to empathize with one another, to sympathize with one another. So,
Right.
you know, I had to thank my girlfriend because she just, like I said, she created that space and she was just like, let it out. You know,
Yeah.
and I was just talking about him and talking about him coming to the barbershop and how I felt about it. And, you know, it was still tough to sleep, a little tougher to sleep last night, but
Yeah.
having that little moment, man, helped.
Yep. No, and I fully agree with that, man. If you could just listen, that might be all you have to do. Because whoever, you know, to our listeners, you may not be the one going through it. Like Malcolm said, you may be the one that they come to.
Yeah.
And as far as therapists go, man, I'm not against therapists at all. I just think we all have family members,
True.
and they will ask the tough questions,
Mhm.
and they know how to.
True.
So you may not like the way it comes out,
True.
but you know they're around you more.
Mm-hmm.
You know, whether it's your mom, your dad, your brother, or whoever.
Right.
You know, if you're like, man, I don't want to, you know, quote unquote, go to a therapist because of the
True. The stigma maybe.
behind
Yeah.
it. You know, then turn to them and
For sure. Or a friend even.
or a friend,
Yeah.
and just allow yourself to open up.
Yep.
And you'll be. I think people would be surprised
True. Very true.
at the how much that would work. Even though you may be like, I don't want to tell my family how I feel, but
Right.
man, emotions are real.
No, they are.
They are real.
They are. And you know, and we've discussed that too in episode 2, I believe, like this notion that as men we can't show emotion.
Right.
Or we live in a society that tells men to not show emotion, right? You have movies and depicting, you know, the men always have to be strong all the time, but the reality of the situation is we have to work through our feelings just like anybody else,
Right.
you know. And I think if we don't allow ourselves to feel stuff like this, then
Right.
we become less human.
Right.
You know.
Yeah, you don't want to be cold-hearted, man, out here. It's all right.
You know, it's perfectly fine to not be numb, because I feel
Right.
like that's something that's normalized today, is being
Yeah.
numb. You
Yep.
know, you see something happen, and you know, whether it's multiple lives or just one life, and people just shrug it off, like,
Yeah, it's like, all right, what, you know.
you know. And I know that I understand that is a part of life. Don't get me wrong, but you know, when it's close to home, man, allow yourself to feel it.
Yeah, let yourself feel it. Like, and to add on to your point, you know, where we talked about, you know, men and stuff, and you know, for the women out there, we know you guys are just as strong.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some women out there that feel like they have to hide it too.
True.
You know.
True.
But my daughter a couple of days ago
Mhm.
asked me, "Do daddies cry?"
Mm.
You know, and I told her the truth. Daddies do cry.
Yeah.
And it's all right. You know,
Yeah.
daddy. And then she was like, "Why?" It's like, because they do cry. She's only 4, so I can't really go into it, but
Right.
I just tell her, simply that yes, daddies do cry, and it's all right. They can cry, So, um, to all the dads out there, it's all right, man. Let your kids know that you're real,
Yep.
and that you feel it too,
Yep.
So, um, that's my little piece on that. But
Nah, that's important, man. And, I don't have kids yet, so I can't speak to that. But I think that's beautiful, man. That you can have that moment with your daughter, or your daughters, and be that real and open and honest with them. Because as they continue to get older, and one day when they choose to be with whoever they choose to be with,
right,
they'll know that, hey, my let's just say for the sake of example that my husband, he's human. He's not Superman. He's entitled to a bad day. He's entitled to cry. He's entitled to be vulnerable. And that goes a long way, man. That goes a long, long way. Because like we always talk about, men and women, we do need each other.
yeah,
Going forward in the future, and we have to work together. And women need to be able to understand that, just like we've had to adapt and evolve to the new woman that can be a go-getter, but she can also be a mom.
right,
She can also be an amazing, wife, et cetera, et cetera. That the new man, the evolved man, can also be vulnerable,
right,
can also be strong, can be a
right.
provider, can be a great father, a great husband. You're just not limited to these old, antiquated ideas anymore.
Nope.
We all have to evolve.
Yeah, just don't put yourself in a box.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
So, Cuzzo, like we said, this is gonna be a little heavier episode, on the chest,
Mm-hmm.
and to our viewers out there, we didn't want this to be, a sad episode. Although it is sad, we wanted our viewers to take away some tips or some ways to handle emotions, and
Yeah.
when things like this happen, what you could do,
Right.
So,
Right.
in summary, Cuzzo, let's
In summary, I would
let's cover those before
Yeah,
we.
I would say in summary, man, it's we talked about when something like this occurs, you question life, you question existence,
Right.
You question your maybe a potential higher power, right?
Right.
And all of those things are normal. I feel like
Yeah.
that's a part of the human experience, right? To
Right.
at least question. But then, secondly, you have to try and follow up with positive things that you can take away from that situation.
Right.
Whether it be like for us, for myself, even, but also I'm sure for you, same thing. It's like gratitude,
Yeah.
man. Giving thanks every day
Right.
for having, for being healthy, for having a family that loves you, for having friends that care about you,
Right.
for just everything that you have,
Right.
even the littlest of things.
Right.
Questioning your own mortality.
Right.
How much time do you have left?
Right.
And what are you going to do with the time that you have left?
Right.
These are all things that run through your brain.
Right.
Working through these emotions, whether you go to see a therapist or whether you find a friend to talk to.
Right.
But ultimately, you have to find a healthy way to get it out.
Right.
You can't allow yourself to bottle it up, man, and to not talk about it. Because
Right.
by not talking about it, you kind of are, without you realizing it, you're just silencing your emotions.
Right.
You're suffocating your emotions,
Right.
and it's causing unnecessary stress to the body
Right.
and the mind.
Right.
And by talking about the individual
Yeah.
that it happened to, in a way, keeps that person alive,
Yeah.
in a positive way, in a positive light.
Right.
And that's what we wanted to do with this episode. Is we wanted to have a full circle moment with him, with his
Right.
life, and how he impacted our podcast.
Right.
And it was a 5-minute interaction,
Right.
but it clearly, because we've dedicated an entire episode to speaking about this,
Right.
shows how much of an impact he had on us in such a short period of time.
Right.
And so, we that was the purpose of making this episode. That was the purpose of discussing these things. But we wanted to also show it's healthy to discuss it and not be afraid to run from it.
Right. Practice what we talk about. This is what we really do.
Right.
We actually do it, as hard as it may be, because you just don't want to be cold hearted. That, like you said, it'll eat you up, and before you know it, you're in a funk, or your mood changes.
Yeah.
And that's just not the way to be at all.
No, man.
So.
No. I think it's situations like this just never get easier to deal with, but
No.
you learn as time goes on how to better deal with them.
Right.
Right.
As long as you practicing what you're, the ways you're supposed to, talking about it, finding a way to release it. As long as you constantly practice that, it'll get easier.
For sure.
As you get older. Never be easy or something you can just be like, oh, all right, this happened. No. It's going to always be tough, but at least you'll know how to deal with it. And
For sure.
I think that's one of the things society in general struggles with, is
True.
how to deal with things.
True.
And, we hope this helped, because, like I said, man, it was tough news to hear last night. And, but like I said, I mean, I'll always hold on to that 5 minutes that, that Jay had on me and us in the podcast. I always hold on to it. And, hopefully I can turn it and pass that on to somebody else. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
So.
Yep. Well, with that being said, man, we really appreciate you guys tuning into this episode. We know, like we said, it was a heavier episode. But if you could just take something away from this particular podcast, hey, then we did our job today. And we also want to give another shout out. Rest in peace to Jay. Our hearts go out to your family, friends, anybody that knew him.
Gio and the Primo family.
Gio and the Primo family. We're thinking about you guys. We're praying for you guys. Yeah, man. So we'll catch you guys on episode 9. And anything else you want to say, Cuzzo?
No, that'll be it, man. See you guys on episode 9.
All right.
Peace.
Later.